There are a lot of things that motivate me, but two things are topmost on the list. One of them is a South African word, and it's called Ubuntu. Directly translated, it means togetherness. I think if all human beings work together, the world would definitely be a better place. I know you're thinking it might be wishful thinking, and I also know we don't live in a utopian world. But if I try, and you try, and everybody tries, it will definitely make a difference. The other word is empathy. I think if we just momentarily put ourselves in the next person's shoes, we can better understand where they're coming from. In so many ways, Ubuntu, remember, it's togetherness, and empathy are interlinked. You can't get togetherness unless you empathize with your fellow human being. This I've learned in the last 13 years being a barber. My name is Peter Atakpo. Surname is Atakpo. Health warning, don't even try and pronounce it, you might hurt yourself. I'm originally from Nigeria. I grew up in a small, beautiful university town called Abraka. Dad lectured at the university, and mom taught at a local primary school. Like most people in my community, education was key to my parents. So it was only natural that after secondary school, I proceeded to university. And I did just that to study accounting. But I ended up being a barber. That's a long story. We'll probably need another speech for that. I won't bore you with it. My first haircut was done on my youngest brother, actually, called Greg. He was the only one kind enough to let me cut his hair. To be honest, he had little choice in the matter. I was 10 years his senior. He couldn't really refuse. You know what they say, especially in Africa, respect your elders. Soon after that, I was cutting friends' hair, whoever was willing. When I got to university, I was the go-to guy if you wanted cheap haircut, or sometimes free haircut. I migrated to South Africa after my studies and quickly made new friends. Kingsley, who later became one of my best friends, had a barber shop, and I used to go hang out there. That's when I realized that if I brushed up on my barbering skills, I could actually make a living doing this. So I did just that and opened a barber shop in Cape Town. That's when I came across the idea of Ubuntu. I'm going to bore you with this. Remember again, it's togetherness. The shop did well for a while until there was a wave of xenophobic tensions. That led to violent attacks on black African migrants. You probably heard of it in the news. South Africa became quite unbearable and dangerous to live in. So I decided to migrate to the United Kingdom. And I've been cutting hair, or barbering, since I got here 8 years ago. Now, what's a barbershop? I know everyone in this room knows what a barbershop is, and whatever definition you think it is, you're right. A barbershop, simply put, is a place where people, men, more recently now, a lot of women go to get cut hair, shave beard, etc. But beyond this, a barbershop is a community. I'm often asked, what kind of conversations take place in a barbershop? And I always have the same answer. Every conversation. Whatever is talked about in the wider world is talked about at the barbers. From sports to politics, religion, men's and women's issues, all kinds of social issues. Just think of it is discussed at the barbers. Nothing is off limits. I see about 100 to 120 clients in a week and spend, on average, about half an hour with each client. So I could have a 16-year-old student in my chair. Next person waiting is a policeman, followed by an ex-prisoner, followed by a priest. Next person, probably a bishop, an imam, all kinds of people. So you can imagine the range of conversations that I have with these people. My general knowledge has improved a lot since I became a barber. And this is because I'm of the opinion that no matter who you talk to, no matter who you listen to, you always have something to gain from them. Whatever is on the news agenda, for some reason, I find some sort of expert to talk to about. To some people, the barbers is the only place they have to go to in order to interact with other people. There is loneliness in this country, especially old people. I try to call them senior citizens, because let's face it, no one really wants to be called old these days. Some old people, some senior citizens look forward to going to the barbers, because to some of them, that's one of the few opportunities they have to meet and interact with other people. And these senior citizens have a wealth of stories to tell, and I enjoy listening to them. So now, let me tell you about 2 stories that showed me why Ubuntu, in bracket, togetherness and empathy, is important. I come across some very smart people at work, especially young people. Many of them, or some of them, have scholarships to the best private schools in the country. Rashad, who is now 13, I've known since he was 6. At age 6, when he came to the barbers, he would grab newspapers and read it cover to cover. That child could hold a conversation like he's a grown man, be it sports, politics, and everything in between. He got a scholarship, full scholarship into Dulwich College. And at year 9, he got admitted, another full scholarship into Eton College. I'm proud to say to you, like he were my own son, that he's at Eton College now. You might be wondering, why am I telling you about Rashad? Now, let me just say this. It's not my making that he's a clever kid. As far as I know, we don't share the same DNA. His heritage is Ghanaian, mine is Nigerian. But it's just the little things that we do, the little extra things that I do to make him achieve his full potential. For example, working an hour or 2 later than I should, if he needed a haircut, or coming to work on my day off, if he wanted a haircut for a school play, school interview, school function, whatever it is. Ever heard of the saying, it takes a child to raise a village? I know that's a cliche, but that's Ubuntu. That's togetherness. The second story happened quite recently. It's about a young man that walked into my shop. Again, like I always do, I greeted him, greetings, with a broad smile on my face. He had a frown on his face and just walked right through the shop, walked past the waiting area without making eye contact, and went to sat right at the end of the waiting area. My colleague whispered to me, I ain't covering his hair with that kind of attitude. When he got to his turn and he was in my chair, I noticed that at every stroke of my clippers, he would feel his head. And I thought, that's interesting. because it's only visually impaired clients of mine that do that. Because obviously they're blind. They can't really see what I'm doing. So they have to feel their hair in order to know what kind of haircut they're getting. I also noticed he would have his hands around his ears every time my clippers went close to his ears. So I figured he probably has sensory problems. Then I struck up a conversation with him, small talk. Told him about my niece. She's 11. She is in one of the best schools in Wales, just got admitted, very smart, and that I was so proud of her. And I just mentioned, cheekily, that she's also autistic. That's when he opened up and told me he was on the spectrum as well, and that I had no idea how much courage it took for him to come into this noisy place. I should really tell you, if you haven't been to a black barber's, it's always noisy. It's chaotic in there. At the end of the haircut, it was a fulfilling experience for him as it was for me. To me, going to work and meeting these interesting people made my job mostly enjoyable. Mostly, sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's hard, but mostly I enjoy it. But little did I know that the conversations that happen at the barbershop could be harnessed and turned into an award-winning play until I met a gentleman called Inwa Elams. He walked up to me one day and said he was gathering material for a play titled Barbershop Chronicles. For weeks, he hung out with us, listening in on some of the conversations. When the play was complete, it sold out at the National Theatre, completely. It was brought back again due to popular demand, and sold out again. That play toured New Zealand, Australia, and currently, as we speak, is touring the USA. I was humbled and honored when I was made the official barber consultant of the play. The play led to me being contacted by Empathy Museum and Migration Museum to record an audio story for a project called A Mile in My Shoes. It involved me telling my story of my life as a barber and as a migrant in the UK. Visitors to the museum would put on headphones, MP3 player, and an old pair of shoes that I had previously donated, and literally walk in my shoes while they listened to my story. I donated a pair of running shoes, just like what I've got on now, because I'm on my feet for hours every day, and I don't think there are any shoes more comfortable than running shoes. Listening to stories and telling stories is part of my work life. For me to share some of these stories with people that haven't particularly had the experience of a black barbershop was an honor. It's such a good feeling to know that people enjoyed your story. Sometimes I get total strangers contact me on social media to tell me how much they loved my story. And it wasn't until I was telling my own story that I realized how much empathy was so central to the way I see and interact with the world. I believe that today there's a need for Ubuntu, again, togetherness, and empathy more than ever. They are the two most vital ingredients to combat misunderstandings that can lead to division, mistrust, and eventually hate. I saw it in South Africa with the anti-migrant violence, and I see it today with the conversations around immigration. If we have empathy, we'll at least be able to imagine. And the key word is imagine, because not until we are the receiving end of it, we can never 100% say we know what the other person is going through. All we can actually do is just imagine what the person is going through. It's so important for us to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. I have often wondered whether if my parents are proud that I'm a barber instead of a practicing accountant, although they both passed away over 8 years ago from cancer. But I think if they were here today, listening to me speak, they will both put their arms around me and say, "Son, we're proud of you." Thank you very much. Thank you.